L'chaim, l'chaim. When I was 26 years old, I became an attorney, a lawyer. And in 5 years, I built up a very, very big, successful law firm. But something wasn't right, and I didn't feel fulfilled. So I picked up and started traveling around the world. I wound up in Israel and went to yeshiva at 33 years old. 13 years ago, I moved back to Miami, Florida, and I went back to practicing law. The first time I walked into a courtroom, it was over 6 years. There's been one common thread that has run through my whole life. Whatever I do, I go all in, mea chuz. I put my whole being into it. My parents used to fight a lot when I was younger, and they got divorced. And when I was about 16, 17 years old. So I couldn't find what I was looking for in a home, and I was searching for acceptance, for someone to take me in, and I found it outside with my friends. There's only one problem. My friends were selling drugs. So I jumped all in, and I started selling drugs. My best friend at 17 years old got murdered in a bad drug deal. I was with him a few hours before. I could have been there. A year later, another good friend of mine, who I was doing the wrong things with, got arrested with a huge amount of drugs and got sentenced to 20 years in prison. I was very close to being with him as well. At that point, I decided I need to turn my life around, and I have to do something positive. I started studying and working really hard and wound up going to law school. I went to law school searching for truth and searching for justice. But when I came out of school and went to work as a lawyer, I didn't find truth. I found sheker. I didn't find justice. I found lies and deception. I met with an older lawyer, and he looked at me and smiled. He said, "Oh, I can see on your face what you're going through." I said, "What?" He said, "What you're searching for." I said, "Yeah, I'm looking for truth." And he laughed. He said, "There's no truth in this world. The truth is at the bottom of a bottomless pit." He said, "They teach you a lot of laws in law school and a lot of rules, but they don't teach you the most important rule." I said, "What is that?" He said, "The golden rule." I said, "What's the golden rule?" He said, "Whoever has the gold rules." Life isn't about truth, it's about money. I said, "Okay." So I went all in. And I worked very, very, very hard, sometimes 15, 20 hours a day. And I built up a huge law firm. It was very successful. I was driving a beautiful convertible sports car, living on the ocean, and traveling around the world. But something was wrong, and I didn't know what it was. Something was missing. So I met with a life coach, and he said, "What do you love to do?" I said, "I like to inspire people, to make them happy, to make them laugh." He said, "So why don't you follow your passion?" So I sold my law firm, and I moved out to Hollywood, California, and I started doing stand-up comedy and was working on a movie script so I could break into the movie business in Hollywood. And then someone invited me to the most exclusive party, not only in California, but probably the world's, at the Playboy Mansion. Hopefully none of you know what that is. But if any of you do, the top Hollywood producers, movie stars, the most famous people in the world go to these parties. And I was there, but I noticed something. People were having fun, but they weren't happy. I looked into their eyes and their faces, and I saw emptiness. I said, "This isn't for me. Something's wrong," but I didn't know what it was. So I didn't know what to do next. So I went to a psychologist, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. I said, "I have all this money, all this success, but something isn't right. The whole world is a big lie. There's no truth in this world." And he looked at me and smiled. He said, "I'm so proud of you." I said, "About what?" "Most of my patients don't figure out the world is a big lie until they're about 50, 60 years old. You're only 30 and you figured it out." I said, "Great, now what?" And he was a Yid, and he smiled. He said, I have something for you. It's going to set you on the right path. Your problem is you're too caught up in the materialistic world. What you need in your life is some spirituality. I said, what is spirituality? I had no idea what that was. So he gave me a book on Buddhism. I said, great. So I started meditating and doing yoga for hours a day. And then everyone decided they're going to go on a retreat to India to meet this big guru. And everyone was very excited in my yoga class. I said, what's so exciting? They said, wait till you meet this guy. I said, why? Like, he hasn't said a word in 15 years. He just meditates on the mountain all day long. I'm like, what is the point of that? I'm Jewish. I can't shut up for 5 minutes. You want me to be quiet for 15 years? This isn't for me. At that point, I had nowhere else to turn. I was starting to give up hope on life. And then at 32 years old, someone introduced me to a Chabad rabbi. He gave me a book. I couldn't figure out what is so exciting about a girl named Tanya, but I figured I'd read it. And I woke up, and my neshama woke up. And I traveled to Eretz Yisrael, and I did tshuva, and I found God. And then a year later, I did tshuva for the second time. I wound up in Lubavitch Yeshiva, or Tamimim, under my rabbi, Rav Gafni. He should live and be well. And I started learning the sikhos of Nun Aleph and Nun Beis, and put a Yechi kippah on my head. Once I discovered Melech HaMashiach, my life changed completely. Like I've always done, I went all in. Someone told me that the Rebbe said that when Mashiach comes, it'll be printed in the newspapers. I said, how can it be? The Rebbe said Mashiach is here. Why is it not in the newspapers? So I took out a 2-page ad on Erev Yom Kippur. It cost $60,000 with a big picture of the Rebbe in Yedot Achronot, the biggest newspaper in Israel. It says, Mashiach is here, adding deeds of goodness and kindness. And a whole explanation of the Rebbe explaining how Mashiach is here. And then I learned the Sikha of Koach Nisan, 28th of Nisan, in Nun Aleph, where the Rebbe said if 10 people wanted Mashiach bad enough, he would be here. Even 2 or 3, even 1. Well, I took that very seriously. So I started putting billboards and buses prints over the entire Israel with pictures of the Rebbe saying, Mashiach b'petach, are you ready? All over Israel, we covered in billboards and buses. I started making Mashiach parties all over the place. We had a giant party in the old city where I was living. We brought the first mitzvah tank in over 20 years to the Kotel. And I wrote to the Rebbe to tell the Rebbe I made Aliyah. And I put it in the Igros HaKodesh. And I opened it up and I almost had a heart attack. The Rebbe said, I'm very happy you just made Aliyah. But what about all the Jews in America who need your help? You need to go back to America and help the Jews there. I was like, whoa, and I put the Igros back on the shelf. That's not what I asked. Over the next couple months, every time I wrote to the Rebbe, I said, go back to doing what you were before. Go back to America. Help the Jews in America. So my wife, who's Israeli, Yerushalmit, and me cried for about 2 weeks straight. And then our mashpia, my mashpia told me, you have to go back to America. So we booked a ticket back to America. The only problem was I had no money left. I was completely broke. So we went back to America, and I wrote to the Rebbe and asked him what to do. He said, you need to rent a house, and even if it cost you more than you could afford, borrow the money from friends and family. And make sure it's a nice house. So I rented a nice house on the water. I borrowed money from my friends and family, and went about my life. I went back to practicing law, and we did a big party, a big farbrengen for the Rebbe, a Yirach of Nisan. And a lot of people came And there was a couple of Lubavitch boys who were struggling with their Yiddishkeit. They had a little bit of a detour, and they showed up at the house, and my wife showed them pictures of how I used to look and my life, how it used to be. And they said, wow, what happened? I said, oh, it's a long story. They're like, will you verbring first? Will you tell us the story? I said, sure. So they came over, and I verbring for them. They said, we want to bring some friends. I said, okay. The next week, they brought some friends and some more friends. And within a couple months, we had 60 to 70 youth at our house for verbringens and barbecues. Baruch Hashem, since then it has turned into a thriving Chabad house in South Florida called The Center. We now have 4 shluchim, a girls program, a guys program. We're in the process of building and renovating a home. And we've inspired over 100 young men, mostly coming from Chabad and from families who've had a detour, back to tshuva, to yeshiva, to the army, to marriage, and to have families of their own. So, Chaim, my law practice, Baruch Hashem, has started doing better again. I've got over 20 employees. The Chabad house is thriving, and I have a family of my own, and I'm very busy, to say the least. But every Monday night, I give a shir live online in the Sikh of Nun Aleph Nun Beis. I've been learning it for 17 years straight, and it's changed my life. I can tell you, 30 years ago, when the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach gave over the Sikha, this week, Chaya Sarah, he said, the only work left to do, we know, is Kabbalat Mashiach Tzikenu. He said it not once or twice, he said it 10 times. But what does that mean, Kabbalat Penei Mashiach Tzikenu? How do you do it? We'd be sitting in the base of Mikdash right now if we knew the answer to that question, but we're here. So what does it mean? I'm not pretending to have the answers, but I do have a few thoughts. First of all, the Rebbe explains, whatever you do, you have to go all in. When Abraham gave everything he had to Yitzchak, he still had 35 years to live. But he gave him everything. He went all in. Whatever you do, put your whole being into it. Mea chus. Second, the most famous saying of the Rebbe connected to Mashiach is, we want Mashiach now. On one hand, Mashiach has to come right now. On the other hand, Mashiach is already here. That means we have to live with Mashiach right now. Mashiach has to penetrate our very being and our very essence. In Parshas B'Halescha, in Nun Aleph, the Rebbe said you have to have 3 verbringens. One with yourself, the second with your family, and the third with your community. This is something I find overlooked. Most importantly, the first one with yourself. Chevre, we're all businessmen. We're all salespeople. We're selling Mashiach. And guess what? If we're not living what we're selling, no one's buying it. We have to be, and I can tell you this with confidence, the most important part of our shlichut is to be a dugma chai, to be a living example. When people see us, they need to say, that's what I want to be like. I want the smile on that face. I want to live like this person. We have to make Mashiach real. We're all unique individuals. We have individual fingerprints, individual retinas. Your shlichus has to be individual and unique to you. Don't be afraid to be yourself, to let your own personality shine in what you're doing. When it comes to your family, I can tell you, the Rebbe said the well springs are already spread out across the world. The question is, are the well springs spread out in our homes? The first time I did tshuva is when I found God. The second time I did tshuva is when I found the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach. The third time I did tshuva is when I almost got divorced 7 years ago. because my wife, who's very supportive of what I'm doing, and very supportive that I'm a soldier of the Rebbe, didn't feel like she had a husband. Chevre, I'm begging you. Our wives want soldiers, but they want husbands. Take time to spend with your wives. Once a week, make a date with your wife, get a babysitter, go for a walk, go for dinner, spend time alone with her. And your children, I can tell you a story at our Chabad house. This kid comes to us, and his father's a big Shliach in Miami, who I respect very much. When he showed up, he told me his name. I said, wow, your father's incredible. He said, my father's a jerk. He cares more about saving the world than his own family. When you spend time with your kids, take your phone and shut it off. Take your Devar Malchus and put it down. Be with your families. So I just want to conclude and say, Adir B'Tachtonim is not only in your shlichut. It's in your home, it's with your wife, it's with your kids, it's with your very essence and being. I would like to thank Melech HaMashiach for saving my life. I would like to thank Rabbi Hendel and the whole Vad for inviting me here to speak tonight. But most importantly, I want to thank every single one of you, the Shluchim of the Rebbe, because what I searched for my whole life, I see in all of your faces, and that's emes. Never stop fighting for the truth. God bless you.